Cool. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of Outward Campfire Chats. My name is Paul Marshallsea, and I'm the Head of Early Careers for the Outward Bound Trust. Today, we are joined by one of my favourite people in Outward Bound, Mr. Ian Davidson, who is Head of Learning and Adventure at our Eskdale Centre. Hi, Ian. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Great to be here.
Fabulous, fabulous. So many of you who have joined us on other Campfire Chats may recognise Ian. Ian has been with Outward Bound for a very long time, working in our Abu Dhabi centre with young people, over in Outward Bound Oman, with kind of the Omani customers that they have there, and now for the last 5 to 6 years has been working in our Eskdale Centre, leading on the corporate work we do there. Ian is a true advocate of the work at the Outward Bound Trust and has constantly been supporting us in the evolution and the thought leadership work in the work that we do. So today's campfire should really provide us with a real opportunity to gain insight into the things that we're thinking about and what might be coming down the road. So Ian, to kick us off, it'd be great just to get a bit of an understanding of what Head of Adventure and Learning does. Over to you, sir.
Thanks very much. That's probably the hardest question there is to answer today. It's a bit of a strange job title, I suppose, but some sort of overall responsibility for the delivery team. So our development trainers, of which we've got some permanent folk and some associate members as well. And big broad skill set and I suppose kind of leading and enabling that team fundamentally with a little bit of kind of management mixed in, and lots of that's about being out coaching, working alongside developing our talent as they're doing their role, and it gets to play out in the sunshine sometimes as well.
Fab. So some parts hard job, but equally quite a bit of really enjoyable stuff, and ultimately getting to see those apprentices and graduates that land at Eskdale learning in a variety of guises, I guess.
Yeah, it's a real privilege to be directly involved with a handful and kind of involved on the fringes with an awful lot of the young folk that are taking their first steps into their careers. So and just watching that growth through the program, I suppose.
Fantastic. No, that sounds like a dream job, Ian. So I guess looking at today, I mean, a key focus for us today is about leadership. In this chat, and I guess with you kind of leading on the work with our early careers programs, I wonder what you think is important in leadership these days.
What's important in leadership? I think probably generally for the world that things are changing a lot faster than they maybe did 20, 30 years ago, even 5 or 10 years ago. Certainly the last 3 years have shown us that we need to be quite resourceful, willing to change our plans and deal with the kind of here and now and what's in front of us. So yeah, I think some folks, as we know, when they're confronted with change, will be on board quite quickly and probably just need to be let loose, and other folks will need some kind of leadership to bring them along in the right direction. So yeah, I think leadership's a bit of a perennial challenge in many respects, and particularly now just very, very resourceful leaders required for a rapidly changing world.
Okay, yeah, and I guess with what you're seeing in the early career arena, I mean, that is predominantly apprentices and graduates. I mean, historically, I think graduates has probably been more where leadership has been the main reference of development. What are you seeing these days, Ian?
I think the first thing to say is that the line between what we might think of as a graduate role and what we might think of as an apprentice role are probably getting increasingly blurred. Whether that's just because we've got apprentices coming in doing degree apprenticeships or some doing master's level apprenticeships, then that creates some interesting dynamics, I suppose, but also just the breadth and of the roles available and the specificity of the roles as well. They're not necessarily things which require a particular degree to do really well. And so, yeah, some very specific challenges with all the different kind of avenues that people can pursue. And I suppose, you know, in that sort of traditional graduate role, you might think of it as, you know, working towards some line management type roles or some project leadership, whereas your maybe more traditional apprentice roles might be progressing towards team leader, supervisor type roles. And I suppose for a more formal line manager role, there might be some slightly different skills, knowledge and behaviours required when you compare that to someone in a supervisory role at the coalface.
Okay.
And the capability to fulfill one role might not transfer over very well into capability to fulfill the other role. So I think the context of that leadership will define what behaviours are required from the leader.
Okay. And I guess what are you, just thinking about the programs that you're involved with, I guess what are some of the trainers or facilitators kind of coming to you with in terms of key leadership attributes they're wanting to focus on?
Wow, interesting one. I guess I get to have a little bit of involvement in lots of these conversations, which is a real privilege. I think for lots of our clients, then there's certainly leadership is an important topic, and for many of them, there's a kind of desire to create these young professionals that are fully capable of leading all sorts of things that are thrown at them. And of course, people have got a starting point which might not be exactly where employers would like them to be, and there's a bit of a journey to go on. I think it's difficult to make sweeping generalizations on this, but certainly I think what we have seen sort of post-pandemic, some themes around the sort of social development and emotional development in early careers, sort of unsurprisingly, you know, maybe a bit behind where they were 3 or 4 years ago. And you know, the access to the sort of activities that might lead to social and emotional development, and leadership by extension, you know, whether that's sort of sports clubs or youth clubs, after school, after college type things, all those additional things that involve engaging with different people, talking and perhaps you know, living or sharing rooms with people you've never met before, that builds some confidence in engaging with people.
Yeah.
Those are things which young people have had a bit less access to the last few years.
Yeah, so there's a real focus, I guess, it sounds like, on that building self leadership, how you manage things, how you respond to things, and then subsequently what, I guess, choices you might make along the way.
Yeah, I think choice is an interesting word. It's often the crux of things as a leader. We've all got choices to make as leaders, and sometimes we don't know we're making those choices. I suppose I think the kind of crux of it is that we expect an awful lot from young people, and sometimes they need a little bit of help to get there.
Yeah.
And you know, there's definitely a difference between the skills that, or the behaviours one needs to lead, and then the behaviours one needs to help other people to lead and develop and coach and mentor someone else to be a leader. And if we show a bit too much leadership ourselves, then that can hold others back from developing their own leadership behaviours.
Okay.
So a really difficult challenge to solve.
Yeah, and undoubtedly a bit of a dichotomy that employers will have, because we, as we see in the world today, people are always very much focused on trying to drive and develop leaders to kind of take forward their business. And I guess with the apprentices and graduates that we're working with, that gives us a challenge to kind of manage that gap between the expectation that they might have had and what they're coming with in terms of personal attributes as a result of some of the experiences that have been had through COVID and other times?
Yeah, I think so. I think going back to, a bit of our process then, designing programs, a lot of that's about, not getting too carried away with all the things we could do and just working out what do these young people need, and what do the employers need of them, and hopefully finding a bridge to link those two things. I think there's certainly some challenges that they've had, but also probably a starting point where it's really useful for folks as they're developing their leadership capacity or capability rather, to kind of understand and be comfortable with some sort of identity of who they are, and part of that's understanding what motivates them to be a leader. So before they're getting into leadership roles, there's some level of self-awareness, I suppose, which later on down the line, as they get some opportunities to have a go at leading, whether that's on a program with us or whether that's back in the workplace, then they'll develop that sense of kind of authenticity ultimately. And I suppose the important thing to mention is that leadership's not necessarily something for everyone. I know, engaging with different employers, some of them have got routes where you can go into whatever leadership role you want to, and ultimately, if you want to be a chief executive or something, then you've obviously got to do some work, but those are opportunities out there. But equally, there are folk who want to lead on more technical things, and are not, maybe not quite so motivated by the people. And I suppose, from an early careers point of view, enabling people to explore a bit of that and what's important to them, where are their interests, and ultimately where do they see themselves in the future, having had a go. That I think those things are quite important for producing some leaders and supporting people to develop as leaders further down the line. Okay.
And I guess just thinking, because I mean, there's quite a lot in there of where you were, I guess, individualizing for different types of people and different pathways they might choose. I guess if there were three things that Outward Bound do really well for developing young leaders, what do you think? What might those three things be?
I think for every program, young people get to experience being uncomfortable, and I mean that in a positive sense, not necessarily being wet and cold in the depths of the winter, but uncomfortable in the sense of I'm not quite sure what to do and I need to find a path forwards.
And dealing with uncertainty.
Yeah,
kind of
I think the world is full of uncertainty, and with leaders to guide us through, and I'm not sure people bring simple problems to leaders, they bring complex problems to leaders. So just getting comfortable with that feeling of I'm not quite sure and I need to work this out. So that's probably the first thing. The second thing is just being able to have a go. The value of experiential learning, I think, is very difficult to encapsulate, but I've got a very vivid memory of working with a group of graduates from the nuclear industry who very confidently articulated all sorts of leadership theory and models to me. And when it came down to making some difficult decisions, their reflection was actually they'd spent lots of time reading and not much time doing, and the opportunity to just have quite a painful conversation at the time and chew through what was important to different people out on the side of a mountain, and that experience of sitting in a leader's seat sort of thing was invaluable to them. So number two, that kind of experiential learning and just being able to have a go. And the third one, I think's probably a sense of if not empathy, understanding of others. And through a bit of a reflective process, and having time to explore the way we think and understanding the way others think. Leaders then managing lots of stakeholders is one of the significant challenges. and being comfortable conversing with others and getting a sense of shared understanding is a really important behaviour.
Fab. That's three great pointers. So, one, being uncomfortable and I guess having an uncertain outcome so that you're having to evolve. Two, that kind of experiential learning, give it a go. Possibly there'll be some failures along the way, and it's really about learning to understand and deal with that. And then three, that empathy and awareness of others so that you can build that team capacity. So three great points there. Thank you, Ian. I guess we talked quite a bit about some of the things that would happen at Outward Bound, some of the experience you've had. I guess what are some of the things that you think work really well in terms of developing leadership capability in the workplace? What are some of the things that other customers of yours are doing or that you've been involved with that you could talk to us about?
Yeah, I'll share a couple of examples. I think one of the things, and this might happen on an Outward Bound program or might happen elsewhere, is about helping people build relationships with peers and maybe folk that are more senior to them as well across the organisation. So, and not necessarily just in a cohort of a particular group of apprentices, but building some support network and relationships beyond that, and that being something that people will draw on into their future. So, opportunities for different departments, different apprentices, different, a broad spectrum of graduates to engage with each other and have some meaningful time to build relationships. I think that's been hugely valuable, from certainly a really valuable aspect of Outward Bound programs and things which I hear that employers are doing back in the business as well. So support networks. And the other is an example from probably a few years ago now, but we had a staff visit to one of the organisations we work with locally, and we took our whole staff team to go and have a look around their workplace and keep ourselves in touch with what the other workplaces look like. But rather than that being, a manager or a couple of managers who organised that was a stretch exercise for some, I think they were third or fourth year apprentices. So they hosted us, they engaged with lots of different stakeholders, many of whom they wouldn't have spoken to before, to organise various different bits of this visit and us poking our noses into different places, and as well as having a bit of time to talk to us about the challenges of their role and all sorts of other bits. Fantastic day, and it was very smooth, and the sense of pride, I think, for those apprentices, and that opportunity to have a go at leading was really powerful for them. So yeah, some opportunities for people to have a go at things with relatively low consequence, I suppose.
Yeah, that's what I guess I was thinking there, is low consequences of that leadership experience you described, but actually from a personal profile perspective, probably quite high consequences, because actually you will have had to engage a certain number of internal stakeholders, plus you're representing your company to a supplier. So actually that can feel quite awkward. That's
lots of challenges for them to overcome.
Yeah. And I'm just interested. I mean, we're kind of talking about things that go well. Is there things that don't always go well, but also pull out great learning, I guess,
on Outward Bound programs?
Well, I guess in your experience with leading folk.
Well, I can certainly think of lots of things I haven't done quite so well as I might do myself as a leader. I think probably some headlines as a leader. You've got some responsibility, I suppose, that goes with the power, if you like, of being in that leadership role, and just being very mindful about the impact that has on people. So and the expectations that you create with that. So we want to have some high expectations, but equally, probably not throwing people in straight at the deep end, which is, sort of tempting to do when you're under a lot of challenge yourself as a leader and you just need some support. So I think probably most of the challenges I've had have been around the level of support that I give to people, and that's different for different people. What I want from people who are leading me is probably different, or is almost certainly different to what people I'm leading want from me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So and the second thing to say is just the notion of, as a leader, I think one of the challenges is sort of insulating the pressure that might come from above and outside, from the people that you're leading, and the fact that you might be under a lot of stress and pressure, that might not be the behaviour that gets the best out of the people you're leading.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess it's knowing the triggers and managing behaviour and how you're feeling about things, and sometimes choosing not to do anything in the immediate moment, but to regroup, come back and do the right thing when you've got the energy in the right place, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I think that comes from a sense of who am I and what's important to me, and who do I intend to be as a leader? Who am I being? And are those two things congruent?
Nice.
And that's taken some time to get that right, and I'm not even sure I'd say I'd got it right necessarily, but it's certainly better than it was in the past. And I think it's it's something that you craft over a number of years being a leader. That some people, sort of feel more comfortable in it, I think, but there's the idea that we can go and recruit some people that are born leaders or
you mentioning that, I was going to ask, what's your take on the, kind of leadership skills being something that can be developed versus something that's just part of you?
I think it's sort of an extension of the nature-nurture debate.
Absolutely.
I buy into the nurture. And there are things which, if you just take your own parents, for example, there are guardians, those role models that you've grown up with, that they will have influenced you in ways that you won't be aware of, but you may become aware of, because other people have different preferences and different, strengths, and different ways of working, that over a period of time, when you're exposed to that, you can recognize some things that are unique about yourself. So I would say I think it absolutely can be developed. Some people arrive with a sense of confidence in speaking to groups of people and organizing others that it takes some people a lot longer to gain.
Agreed.
Person is not necessarily the best leader.
That's a great answer on that. Well done. Just then thinking about, I guess the space you work in is very much that early career space. Lots has changed, as we've talked about, from COVID, and the development of just young people generally. I guess what's next from an Outward Bound perspective, or from your perspective in leading your development team at Eskdale? What are the things that are on your radar to be?
Great question. It's a very difficult question to answer. Sort of part of it's about trying to predict the future, but we'll have a go. There's I think Outward Bound started to help young people confront their future challenges. And we find ourselves with young people facing very different future challenges, but we are nevertheless here to help them navigate those challenges. And some of that going back to that sort of dealing with uncertainty, having a go, all of those things are very relevant to whatever those future challenges are. I think the things which are on people's radar at the moment are a response to where we're at now and where lots of young people find themselves at. So it's hard to say what that will be in a year or two, but what it is at the moment, I suppose, is some things around how do we support people to be proactive at managing their mental health and well-being. And, you know, certainly from an employer's perspective, those can be challenging conversations to have at times. Where does our responsibility start and end as an employer? But certainly, you know, work is a large part of people's lives quite often, and we've clearly got some responsibility, you know, as outbound as an employer, but also the organisations we work with. So mental health and well-being, and how do we help young people recognise things which contribute positively to them?
And how do you suggest dealing with, or how do you suggest are some of the best ways to deal with and manage those kind of situations?
I think it's very individual, to be honest with you. There's certainly some common themes. So, you know, around kind of human connection. I'm not necessarily suggesting that's big social events. That's not everyone's cup of tea, but the opportunity to connect with each other. You know, we know that kind of exercise and being outside are good for us. Again, the extent to which you do that's going to vary by individual. Some of it's about taking notice of what's going on around us. You know, whether that's on a very small scale in our immediate physical surroundings, or whether that's on a broader scale about what's happening around in our community. You know, and I think ultimately, you know, probably a little bit of like self-praise as well, and recognizing when we've made a positive contribution to something. Rather than a consistent focus on what do we need to do better.
No, I mean, that's a great answer. I mean, I guess it's a big challenge for all of us, you know, in our daily jobs, kind of working with young people and colleagues across the board from a mental health and well-being perspective. But those things of you know, having that human connection, taking notice of people, making sure you're getting some physical exercise, you know, self-praise and recognizing the things that people do well. Some great top tips on that. So thanks on that one, Ian. Good one to have. And I guess the other side of this as well is then you know, these programs, you know, to send people away and do development on leadership, they're expensive. I guess what are some of your pieces of advice to help increase buy-in with the organization for people that are looking to invest in development or leadership development or behavior development?
I try not to project too many of my own values on this. I am really biased. You know, I have a role that's about people development, so I'm quite passionate about that and people having the opportunity for that. And you know, I think when folks have an opportunity to, whether it's go away or whether it's do things as part of their role, that growth is something which is you know, helps people feel good about themselves. You know? Back to our kind of mental health well-being piece. I think more generally about how do we influence stakeholders to get some buy-in for things which might be expensive or time-consuming. The one thing is about understanding who the stakeholders are and what their expectations are. Who I think is about how is this part of the wider organizational strategy? And you know, if you understand what your stakeholders want and it's connected to some kind of strategy, that, well, for me, would go quite a long way, I think.
Cool. Yeah, so it's that vertical and horizontal alignment with the organization and the people in the peer group. No, that's great. One final question from me then, Ian. This is a question we're asking everybody we do these campfire chats with. If you could recommend 3 things a young person to do between leaving education and starting on an early career program to give themselves the best start, what would they be?
3 things. So young people are going to have an awful lot of suggestions by the time we've finished all these chats then. It's tempting to say don't listen to other people, find your own path, kind of thing.
Okay.
No, I think the first thing is like go off and try some things, and it you know, the example I'd give is like the young person on work experience, you know, and asking me if this is a career they should pursue, kind of thing. And yes, I'm passionate about outdoor education, but that young person just needs to go and try something. So and find out if it's right for them. So try something. If it's salsa dancing or, you know, sleeping in a tree house, whatever it is, just go and try something.
Do something new, challenge your comfort zones. Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And go and do things sometimes which make you uncomfortable and get used to that feeling. I think anytime you change jobs or start a new job or big transition in your life, then lots of things feel uncomfortable. And if you get used to that, that stands you in great stead. And I think the third thing is about finding positive role models in your life. We've all got people who, you know, radiate warmth to us, and we've all got people that drain the energy out of us. And find your radiators.
Yeah, absolutely. No, some 3 great top tips there. Well, that's fabulous, Ian. Thank you very much for your time today, sir. I really appreciate that. Always good to get some insight from the coalface, as we call it, and see how we can really work with developing leadership and young professionals, as you do in Eskdale. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Out of Band Campfires. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.